For tonight and only tonight, we're going from the basketball court to the farm. Coming up, Senator Ricketts with choice words about a potential farm bill being passed during the election year. This year, check out what he has to say shortly. Plus, Steve, the captain of the ship still, don't worry, talks with the CEO of Fonner Park in Grand Island, talking about horse racing's connection to agriculture. And finally, water fights? Not the ones your kids have in the front yard. We're talking rivers later in the show. It may be a new face tonight, but it's still time to grow. Hey there, friends. Thanks for sticking with us. I'm Trey Redfield in for Steve. We'll hear from Steve a little on later in the show. But let's start out with something very Nebraska-like. Good lifers helping others. A convoy of semis headed to the Texas Panhandle Thursday to help those currently dealing with catastrophic wildfires. This footage was taken by Jaden Roof of Cambridge, who wrote, quote, "Nebraskans doing their thing, dropping everywhere to go to help out others. Hope for a trouble-free trip, and most of all, a safe one for everyone," with multiple exclamation points, rightfully so, right? Jaden's family was one of those who lost nearly everything in the Road 702 fire 2 years ago and received feed and fencing donations back then. And Jaden's dad and brother are in one of those trucks looking to pay it back to others in need. Jaden, he stayed back because it's calving season here at home. As for those in the Lone Star State, some reports have the cattle lost at 3,600 head, some of which are still burning. And the cattle who are still alive are having trouble finding food. The convoy of the Nebraska hay trucks is much needed and welcomed by producers in the Texas Panhandle. That was just one run of feed and supplies making its way to ranchers in need due to the fires in Texas. And here at home, the people that NTV's Shady Ferguson spoke to this past week say it must be the Nebraska way, because once word got out, people started teaming up together to gather supplies.
Just natural that we wanted to see what we could do for our neighbors here.
Ivan Miller, owner of Miller Repair, explains after the fires and all the damage caused, they posted on Facebook how they wanted to help. He says the reaction they got was overwhelming, and one rancher they delivered to lost everything.
So we was able to take a load of tools and supplies, just whatever he needed.
A load of supplies, Maria Miller says, that rancher will never forget.
They're hauling things into the shop. As I came out of the shop, I could see that he was leaned up against the building and just sobbing.
Maria says when this happens, it's not like you can go over to your shop for tools anymore because it's gone.
There's so much damage, the fences are burned. And just to keep cattle off of any areas that have been damaged.
The Millers explain they've had several people asking when people will start needing help with putting up their fences.
There's just so much that can be done yet that still needs to be done.
Ivan Miller says with spring and summer coming up, everyone will begin their work, so they're going to need necessities, hay, fencing, and other monetary donations.
Ranchers are a pretty proud bunch of people, and they don't like to ask for help.
And because of this, the Millers were asking for others to reach out to them if they know someone who may be too prideful. But they're not the only business who is offering help. CR Hay in Overton has partnered with the Nebraska Alfalfa Marketing Association as well as a feed store in Canadian Texas to help ranchers picking up the pieces following their own horrific wildfires in the Lone Star State.
We've put together a group of hay trucks, donated feed from producers all across the state.
Robinson says the amount of people contributing to the ranchers in Nebraska, he also wanted to help those affected in the panhandle of Texas.
Just trying to help somebody that's down on their luck right now.
Although hay is their main delivery supply, he says they're putting another trailer full of fencing supplies.
People that you'd never expect show up and want to chip in with feed, with tractors, with trucks, and make sure we can get the best trip put together we can.
He says this is something that affects the whole community.
It's not just the producer himself that's emotional about it. It's the small town daycares, nursing homes, the people that are out on the sidewalks.
More than 1 million acres turned to ash in the Texas Panhandle, destroyed hundreds of structures and thousands of livestock due to the fires still burning there. Roughly 28% of the nation's beef herds are raised in the Texas Panhandle. For more information on how you can help donate or volunteer, visit our website at nebraska.tv. Nebraska Farm Bureau resident Mark McCarg reacting, saying, quote, the SEC made the correct decision today, but we remain dedicated to ensuring Nebraska's farm and ranch families aren't hit with the regulatory burdens and legal liability for similar rules in the future. Nebraska farmers and ranchers know that sustainability, in quotes, is more than just a trendy catchphrase. It is what they've been doing for decades in producing more food, fiber, and fuel for the world using less land, water, fertilizer, and other inputs, end quote. So will Congress get a new farm bill passed this year? And it could be during this year, which is, oh, by the way, a presidential election year. Could that be the reason why this doesn't happen? That was the question posed this week to Senator Pete Ricketts. And he says if one doesn't get voted on in the Senate, well, he already knows who he's going to blame.
Our farmers and ranchers deserve a 5-year extension of the Farm Bill to create that certainty that's good for not only Nebraska and agriculture, but food security is national security. So this is an important thing to have. And frankly, it's in the hands of the chair, the Democrat chair of that committee, Debbie Stabenow, to get that done. So it's really up to her to be able to get this all resolved. So I do think it's important. We look forward to seeing the text of the bill. If it doesn't happen, it's actually because of the leadership of Debbie Stabenow that she didn't want to get it done.
Good news for ethanol producers. While car manufacturer Stellantis is investing $6 billion into flex fuel vehicles in South America, the United States is exporting more ethanol than it did a year prior. The U.S. exported nearly 150 million gallons of ethanol in January of this year, along with more than 900,000 metric tons of distillers' grains. That ethanol number is significantly higher than the number from last year's total by the time in January 2023. It didn't quite reach 118 million gallons. The top recipients of American ethanol: Canada, India, and the United Kingdom. The USDA is investing $30 million to expand affordable, clean power to rural Nebraska. Rural Development Acting State Director Joan Scheel announcing $12 million in investments that will improve access to reliable electricity and $18 million in clean energy investments to reduce pollution and strengthen America's power grid. This is all part of the USDA's program that's investing $2.2 billion to support 39 projects in 31 states, including right here in Nebraska. From CRP sign-up to the crucial decision of ARC versus PLC, Steve White caught up with UNL's Brad Lubin about the comparison.
Visiting now with Brad Lubin, I've got my CAP here, Center for Agricultural Profitability. That's what you guys are.
We do that. All of our ag economics work and our farm management information is available through our Center for Ag Profitability, which conveniently can be found on the web at cap.unl.edu.
Hey, that is easy. One of the things that we've been talking about is this ARC and PLC decision. Yeah. It's come due again.
Right. Producers face that same decision that they have every year now. They face the decision at the FSA office by March 15th. Choose between PLC, that price loss coverage program to provide some downside price protection, or choose ARC, agriculture risk coverage, that moving average revenue safety net, which can provide maybe more broad protection against both price and yield losses, but remember only does so on a portion of the losses before it caps out.
And how long does this decision, when will I make the next decision?
Yeah. Well, we are now down to annual decisions for these programs. The 2018 Farm Bill implemented the system where it becomes an annual decision. Realized we didn't get a new Farm Bill last year on schedule. Right. We got a simple 1-year extension of the existing bill. That 1-year extension brings another 1-year decision. So we have an annual decision on farm programs. Conveniently, that marries up with an annual decision on crop insurance programs at the same time. Yeah. March 15th is an important date.
Brad, let's talk about ARC and PLC and then the connection with crop insurance.
Yeah. So we can spend a lot of time talking about the farm program, and this is a decision between ARC and PLC. There is also the connection to crop insurance, and that's a separate decision with your crop insurance agent. But there's a program in crop insurance called the Supplemental Coverage Option, okay, which is a county-based safety net that is tied to whatever you buy on the farm. So if you buy a revenue policy on the farm, it's a revenue safety net, but it's determined on the county level. Well, SCO is an option if you're not in ARC.
Okay.
So your ARC versus PLC decision at FSA might dictate whether you can or can't choose SCO. SCO and ARC look on paper an awful lot alike, and there's a reason why you theoretically can't have both.
Sure.
But it's really a separate decision, and I can't give you enough economic insight to say, is ARC better than PLC, or is it ARC versus PLC plus SCO? Those are numbers you'll have to figure out, but it's worth at least remembering that might be part of the decision.
So in terms of ARC versus PLC, should you just default back to what you've done?
The economics of this decision, because arguably it's different than it has been. There was a period in time when ARC was the clear winner. There was a period in time when PLC was the clear winner. It's a lot closer this year. If you take corn as an example, as the leading example, PLC is a safety net program that would kick in when national market year average prices fall below 401. ARC is a revenue program, but if you calculate a price component in it, ARC would kick in at 417, assuming trend yields in the county. Is 401 a better safety net on price, or is 417 sort of a better safety net on revenue, assuming trend yields? They're not as far apart as they were. It's a more difficult decision.
Much more from Steve coming up, and rightfully so, right? Like I said, he's the captain of the ship. Up next on NTV's Grow, when he catches up with the CEO of Fonner Park, tracking the connection between agriculture and the horses. Stick with us. A tragic week this past week for our friends at Fonner Park, following the deaths of 3 horses and injuries to jockeys and staff at the conclusion of last Sunday's final race. Before any of that happened, though, Steve had a chance to chat with Fonner Park CEO about the connection between horse racing and agriculture.
Well, there is nothing like the springtime tradition of thoroughbred horse racing at Fonner Park. Chris Katulak. When we talk about this industry, people may not think about it, but it is so deeply rooted in agriculture.
Well, that's our mission, Steve. It is our charter that Fonner Park is, and parimutuel racing in Nebraska is, to provide for agriculture and horse breeding. And we're doing that here in the state. It's fallen off over the last few years, but it certainly is picking up.
But do you see with the casino, the other revenue sources, do you see some opportunities to potentially grow back and breed more horses here in Nebraska?
Well, there's 2 things that must happen. First of all, you may not have a casino unless you have a racetrack. Secondly, you can't really have a racetrack unless you have horses to run in those races at that racetrack and race days for those horses to run. What is happening on a national scene is there is a reduced number of thoroughbreds going to the racetrack every year. Horsemen here in Nebraska are finding it difficult to acquire horses to race right here. But here's the beauty part of it. We can have insular growth right here in Nebraska with our thoroughbred racing industry. We can breed, raise, and race Nebraska's breds right here. Nebraska bred thoroughbreds don't have to leave the state after they're finished here at Fonner Park.
And you look at the impact beyond just the horses, but they've got to eat. We've got to provide feed. I mean, I'm sure a lot of that is sourced right here in the state.
It's ag. It's all ag, and we know how significant that is to our state economy. We have people that are growing grain, people that are growing grasses for these horses to eat, but then the jobs that are created, not the least of which are veterinarians, horse farriers, but of course the farmers that are growing all this product for our thoroughbred racehorses.
And you've been doing this just a few years here at Fonner Park.
Well, we started in 1954. We've been racing for more than 70 years. This is my second tour of duty, getting on 20-some years collective here at Fonner Park, but from 1986 to right now. I love this place. I want to do everything for it, but we all must collaborate, especially now with this revitalized thoroughbred racing industry in Nebraska.
But it's not unusual that these barns on the other side of the grounds are filled, and these barns over on this side of the grounds are filled as well.
Well, that's the idea, but actually we have less horses this year than we have in the past, and that's even with the 20% purse increase. So that's why the horse breeding element of this whole, call it a casino picture, call it a racing picture, but this whole gaming industry in Nebraska cannot survive unless we get more Nebraska-bred thoroughbreds, and we're working on it. Problem is, in the past, we've had people that have bred Nebraska breds, but they started breeding Iowa breds, Minnesota bred, Okie breds because of their gaming industry. Now we need them to come back to breeding thoroughbreds in Nebraska. They're starting it, and we're starting to see that.
Hey, let's get that done, right?
We've planted the seed. Now we need to cultivate it.
Well, Chris, I've appreciated visiting with you.
Always a pleasure. Come on by. We'd love to have you here at our race barns.
When we come back, we complete the dynamic trio. Myself, Steve, and then Kyle on the other side. Our Grow Weather Outlook is next. Stick with us.
Curated playlists to help you stay on top of local news. weather, and sports. Subscribe to the NTV YouTube channel.
Well, this week's drought monitor that was released this past Thursday morning, and of course still pretty dry across much of Kansas and some of Nebraska as well. Not a whole lot of change, but have seen a couple of slight changes here, especially across Kansas. Actually some improvements here. The no drought now stands at about 41% of the state in that category, and likewise on the contrary, do have abnormally dry now at about 59%, so about a 6.5% improvement in both of those categories compared to last week. Otherwise, the rest of the categories about the same. Moderate drought about 28 2/3%. Severe drought still stands at 2.32%. Got a couple of pockets of that across the entire state. Moving up north to Nebraska now, not a whole lot of change here either. In fact, most categories about the same compared to last week. 65 2/3% of the state still in no drought. Good sign, even with the lack of rain that we've had the last couple of weeks or so. Abnormally dry, about 34 1/3%. 24.5% in the moderate drought category. Severe drought still stands at about 12%. Of course, no extreme or exceptional drought across all of Nebraska or all of Kansas. Certainly a good sign there. The March temperature outlook, again, this remains unchanged compared to last week. Still expecting slightly above average temperatures for much of Nebraska and much of Kansas. Otherwise, average temperatures expected for southwestern Kansas and southwestern Nebraska, extreme parts of the state. Otherwise, precipitation also has not changed compared to last week. Still expecting above average precipitation totals for really all of Kansas and all of Nebraska, with a better shot of precipitation maybe in southwest parts of the panhandle of Nebraska, indicated by that darker shade of green right there. So good to see that for the month of March. And again, the 3-month outlook here for March, April, and May remains unchanged from last week. Still average temperatures expected for all of Nebraska as well as all of Kansas. And likewise, the 3-month precipitation outlook. Not a whole lot of change here either, if any at all. Still have slightly above average precipitation totals expected for much of central east Nebraska and central and eastern Kansas. Otherwise, average totals expected for the rest of Nebraska and the rest of Kansas. Well, let's take a look at your Grow Almanac here for the week ahead. Normally this time we see a high around 51. The temperature's starting to go up as we approach the spring. Otherwise, we see a normal low around 28. The week ahead averaging a high around 59. The week ahead average low sits at 36, so a little bit above our normal we see for this time of year. And I'll see why in just a second. Again, starting off the week very nice. Again, temperature near 70 on Monday. And again, we'll see those temperatures unfortunately slowly decline throughout the rest of most of the week. Do get maybe a little warmer on Friday after a good precipitation chance rolls around Wednesday night into Thursday. Maybe a little bit lingering into Friday, but still a lot of uncertainty towards the end of the week. Otherwise, enjoy the start of the week. Again, 70 on Monday, 65 Tuesday. Fortunately, we did have some snow this past week, later on in the week, but your Grow proverb kind of relates to that. In March, much snow to plants and trees. Much low. Well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see if those trees maybe end up sprouting later in the month of March after all this snow does finally decide to end. Well, that is a check of your Grow weather report. Stay tuned next week when once again it will be time to grow.
Next on NTV's Grow, we talk about water fights. And like I said, not the ones that you see with your kiddos in the front yard. But it's not here in Nebraska this time as well. A look at the states battling over the Colorado River next.
Ag Innovations is sponsored by Acres Equipment, solutions for every field. Acres has what you need to get the job done.
Nebraskans have seen our own water fight over Republican river rights not long ago. This time, a series of states battle over who gets what from the Colorado River. Joe Mueller reports.
Yeah, just conserve.
People who visit Lake Mead know something has to change to keep more water here.
I think it would be best to just not use so much of the water and keep a little bit back.
The big question, how do we save as much of it as possible? The feds think Lake Mead and our water supply are okay for now, but they need a plan for after 2026, and some ideas are being sent their way, but they differ. There are 2 new proposals for how to save 1.5 million acre-feet of Colorado River water by cutting allocations. One coming from the lower basin states like Nevada, Arizona, and California. The other come from the states upriver, Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, and New Mexico. John Ensminger from the Southern Nevada Water Authority weighed in after the proposals came out this week.
Ours shares the pain, and theirs shifts all the pain to us.
And those two proposals look very different.
They're fundamentally at odds with each other. The negotiations between the upper and lower basin states unfortunately did sort of start to break down the last few months, and that was clearly evident.
John Berggren is a regional policy manager from Western Resource Advocates. This is an organization working to protect and sustain the environment in the West.
On our end, we're going to be looking at how each proposal impacts the various environmental considerations that we care about.
He says they also plan to submit their own proposal, focusing on how to save the river's environment and how to stabilize the whole system.
And then we're also going to be in partnership with some other environmental NGOs, submitting our own ideas.
All right, that does it for me tonight. Thanks so much for joining us and adjusting to the change a little bit. Steve will be back with you next week when it's time to once again grow.
NTV's Grow is brought to you by Aurora Cooperative. Tougher together, Aurora and you.